Thanks for thanks for joining us. My name is Jeff Blumenfeld. I'm the chairman of the Rocky Mountain chapter of the Explorers Club. The Explorers Club, for those who may have heard of it but don't realize what it was founded in 1905 in New York City. And over the course of the years, we now have 3,600 members all over the world. Members that included Cook, Perry, Avinson, Neil deGrasse Tyson, James Cameron, Sir Edmund Hillary. The list goes on and on. 3,600 members. And the Rocky Mountain chapter is one of 33 chapters around the world. And I've been quite honored to lead that. And I'm kind of an expedition groupie because of these people in the club. I'm just fascinated by their stories and the things that they've done and their expertise in various areas of the world. And it's something that I write a newsletter called Expedition News, and it's something that I'm just honored to cover from our members. At this point, I'd like to introduce Ricardo Peña. I met Rihanna at one of the talks that I gave, and it's been maybe 5-6 years, and we've been close friends ever since. I've been so thrilled when she announced that her marriage to Ricardo, and I've been just totally impressed following her career as she's going to be also Ricardo's music director, which we'll learn a little more about. Ricardo Peña.
Hi everyone, thanks so much. It's great to see so many people out here. So I'm going to introduce Ricardo Peña, the Ricardo Peña. Professional musician, mountaineer, mountain guide, my husband. 3 years now, and we've been together for about 6 years. We have a shared love of the mountains, of exploration, science, music, and adventure. So he's here to tell you about the Andy survivor story, his connection to it. And I wanted to give you a little bit of his background. So Ricardo wanted to climb just one mountain in his life. I'm going to screw up the name. Okay, a Mexican volcano. I was working on it. So it's a Mexican volcano. So he wanted to climb this one mountain. He saw it as a kid. He had this fascination with snow, ice, and seeing it. And then about a week before he was supposed to go climb it, it exploded. And it's been active ever since. And as a result, he became a mountaineer, and he's climbed mountains all around the world, including up on Everest, the 50 state high points, and then Colorado's 100 highest he just finished this summer. Yay. And without further ado, let's start.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Let me start by, I want to know, get an idea how familiar you are with the story. So if you could show of hands of how many of you have read the book Alive? Okay. And how many of you have seen the movie Alive? All right. I will tell you a little bit about the whole story, what happened originally, and then I'll tell you my involvement with the story and what we've discovered in the last 50 years. Next slide, please. This story began exactly 50 years today. On 13th of October, it was a Friday, October 13th, 1972. And just so you get the geographics of what happened, where it happened. This is South America. A group of Uruguayan rugby players chartered a plane from the Uruguayan Air Force because it was the cheapest way to fly, to go to Santiago, Chile, and play a rugby match. So on October 12th, they flew from Montevideo to Mendoza. They made a stop here because there was bad weather on the Andes. This is the Andes right here. And so they spent the night in Mendoza, and then finally on October 13th, they went for the flight. And in order to cross to Santiago, jetliners do it this way. They just go a little bit south and they cross this way. But the plane they were flying was a Fairchild Fairchild FH227 is what it's called. It's a twin turboprop plane. Doesn't have that high of a ceiling for flying, so they had to go down to Malargüe, cross the Andes here over a pass called Planchon, and then fly past Curicó and then fly to Santiago. So on October 13th is where our story begins. This flight, can I have the next? This picture was taken in Mendoza Airport, Mendoza, Argentina. That's the plane, the Fairchild. The Air Force had the designation number 571, so that's why it's known as the Fairchild 571. And it's an important part of our story. The plane, and all because of the artifacts that we have found throughout the years. There were 45 passengers. At the end of this tragedy and this survival story, there was 16 of them survived. I'm going to focus on 3 characters just to give you a little bit of a perspective of what transpired. One is Eduardo Strauch, and wearing a blue coat, and this coat is very relevant to our story too, so take a good look at it with the sunglasses. The other one is Roberto Canessa, and unfortunately behind this guy is Nando Parrado. It's this tall guy behind. You can't see his face, but those are the 3 main characters. There's the captain of the team, is Marcelo. So, and this group is composed of the rugby team, the actual rugby team. Roberto and Nando were members of the team. Eduardo was an ex-member of the team, and he was best friends with the captain. So, the captain was the active captain of the team. So there were the rugby players, their friends, coach, for instance. Here's one of the coaches. Friends, coaches. They try to fill up the plane to make the flight cheaper. So the more they would divide the cost of charting this plane, cheaper it would be for everybody. So that's why there were 45 passengers. Next slide. So this story, I call it, it is known as one of the greatest survival stories for many reasons, for good reasons. If you analyze the best survival stories, like the Endurance in Antarctica, or with Shackleton, it's an incredible survival story of 1 year spent in Antarctica, surviving, being stuck in the ice and all that. But there's also like the story of the Essex, both where Moby Dick is inspired from, that involved cannibalism too and everything. They're incredible stories, but the difference between this story and that story is that those stories were, the people that were going there, they were going on an expedition. They were preparing themselves for Arctic conditions, for danger. So at least they were professionals or people supposed to be prepared for that, where these guys had no mountaineering experience, no Arctic experience. They were a rugby team going in the spring of the Southern Hemisphere, bringing short sleeves, long, just shirts, sweaters, coats. They weren't prepared for snow and Arctic conditions and for any kind of survival. So they were thrown into this situation, and they had to figure out how to survive this. So it makes it very unique among survival stories. This picture was taken exactly 50 years ago today. They're flying from Mendoza, as I said, to Santiago. And this photo was taken about less than an hour before the crash. So this is and I'm going to be going back to this picture too, because there's a few interesting things in this photo. Behind this head right here, according to Eduardo, this is him. He was sitting right there. If you notice that the plane has shelves and it had coats on top. Another interesting thing, tragically, this is one of the crew members of the Fjällräven Air Force, and what happened was that the plane crashed, and when it crashed, it hit a ridge and split in 2 sections, and so some of the passengers got sucked out of the back and fell to the deaths, including this crew member and the people that were sitting in the back. A lot of people in the middle survived. This guy, the coach, trainer, was sitting right in front, and at the moment of impact, the whole seats like moved forward and crushed the front seats, so the people at the very front also died. So it was like just the middle seats that survived. Next picture. So in the afternoon of October 13th, the plane, what happened was that the pilot miscalculated somehow. He said that, let's go back to the map so I can show him one picture. He miscalculated. After, in Malargüe, he checked in with the control tower. He made a turn. He was crossing the Andes. And when he was about 6 minutes into the crossing, like he starts the crossing here, so 6 minutes would have put him right in the crest of the Andes, somewhere in the middle. He says, I guess they're going this way. He's about here. He says, radio Santiago, and said, permission to turn north to descend to Santiago. Tower control in Santiago says permission granted, without checking the time either. So there were mistakes made. The pilot thought, he said, we passed Curicó, and we're turning north to Santiago, is what he told the tower. And they said, okay, go ahead and turn. So he was badly mistaken because he was here. The Andes were covered in clouds, at least lower peaks and everything. So he started descending into the clouds. And as they got closer to the mountains, then obviously turbulence started as the typical drafts and winds from the mountains started hitting the plane. And by the time they cleared the clouds, they realized they were surrounded by mountains. So the pilot pitched the plane as high as he could, try to overcome the ridge that was in front of him, which happened to be the crest of the Andes. It happened to be where Chile's to one side, Argentina's to the other side. And he didn't make it, and so he hit the plane, hit right on the ridge, broken, lost the wings, broke in two pieces, and it's very luckily, the other side was an avalanche gully. And so he hit that this was October 13th, is the beginning of spring. There were tons of snow. It was a very heavy snow year. So they slid down that avalanche gully. And that's another key part of survival, because if they would have gone a little left or a little right, it would have been, those peaks are very jagged and rocky. It would have destroyed it. There's tons of airplane crashes that have happened throughout history in the Andes, and most times there are zero survivors. Those are very jagged mountains, much steeper, sharper than, say, the Colorado Rockies. So, than most of the mountains. So it was extremely lucky that he took that avalanche gully, which I'm going to show you in a few pictures later, and slid down about 2,000 vertical feet and ended up in a glacier. The plane stopped when the angle changed and hit more softer snow, or just more horizontal snow, and it stopped right there. At the moment of that stop is when all the seats crunched, and the people that were in the middle survived, but the people in the front died. People in the back had fallen out the back. The tail was gone. Go back to the slide. So that's how it began. In a matter of an hour, everything changed for them. They were in the middle of the worst nightmare of their lives. The fuselage had the front part of the fuselage. The cabin was like crushed in. The pilots were embedded against the instruments. One of them was still alive, and when they went to see him, they couldn't get to it because in between where they were seated and the cabin, there was the luggage compartment. And between all the crash and everything, they couldn't access it in the beginning. So they went outside the snow, went around, and saw the captain, which was actually the co-pilot, was flying the plane. And he was still alive. And he kept saying, "We passed Curicó, we passed Curicó," and as he was dying. And that's all the survivors heard, "Passed Curicó." And then he died that night. When many people died that night. There were 27 people that survived the initial crash. And they used the fuselage as shelter. Temperatures that time of year could have been anywhere between, during the day, on a sunny day, it could have felt comfortable, like you see in this picture. This is a little later. This is in November. This picture that was taken by them. But they could go as low as minus 20, minus 25. They were about 12,000 feet right here. The peak they had hit on, which was from this picture, is looking that direction. They hit at about 14,200 and slid down that gully to about 12,000 for this glacier. Next. So quickly the problem became, well, first it was the cold, the extreme cold, so from the luggage they got whatever layers they could, sweaters, jackets, whatever they could, clothing from the dead. They didn't waste anything. And then dehydration, of course. They were thirsty after hours of being there. And I mean, the first night was horrendous for everybody because they were freezing. And they huddled in the little surviving part of the fuselage. But the air that was coming up from the opening was killing them. So they stacked luggage to try to block the wind and the cold. And they were, I mean, literally on top of each other. There was very little room. They removed the seats so that it could fit in there. And they used the seats, you can see the seat cushions, as insulation between the fuselage and the floor and the fuselage. And then they started taking seat covers out of the seats to use as blankets. And I brought a few artifacts that I'm going to be showing you. And at the end, you're welcome to take a close look. This is part of one of the actual seat covers. So just to show you how thin we're talking about this. So imagine just that this is your blanket and all you have, and you're wearing these clothes, and it's minus 20 at night, So it was horrible for them. Next day they're all like super thirsty, they're completely dehydrated, and they try eating the snow and quickly realize you're just not going to get hydrated like that. You burn your mouth and you don't get enough water. And you get chilled. So they started trying to melt water, and they used bottles like this one, like wine, empty wine bottles. The pilots had bought some wine in Mendoza. Mendoza is famous for its wines, and the pilots had been drinking before the flight. It was like they had lunch in Mendoza. It's typical to have your beef and your wine. It's like it's almost a sin not to have wine with your beef in Argentina. So they had been drinking. They bought a few cases of wine bottles, so they used them to store the water. The survivors also found a flask of half-drunk liquor in the cockpit too. So they might have been under substantial influence of alcohol, making those bad decisions. So they solved the problem of dehydration by using, like, if you see this little metal, they use like the metal plates from the back of the seats. They would put snow thinly dispersed and melted in the sun into the bottles and collect water that way. And so that, again, remember that this is snow, it's pure water, it doesn't have electrolytes or anything. So it's just, when you melt it, you end up with pure H2O. And so, or very little, not just pure H2O, but no real electrolytes. There's no, so, which makes you dehydrate more. The water will just go through you more. You need to include some salts, something. And food, there was no food on the plane. It was, all they had was a few crackers, some cans of anchovies, little thin chocolates that people had bought. And so very, very little food that lasted them about 10 days. What they did is they rationed, started eating like little squares of chocolate, one square of chocolate and a little capful of sip of wine. And that was it for the day, each person. So they were quickly starving, in a matter of days. Next slide. So this picture was taken later, but it's the only images we have of, one of the few images we have of them during the ordeal. This was taken in November. They found a camera that worked, and they took a few pictures. Some of the survivors felt like, well, why are you taking pictures? And we saw it for them too. And they said, well, if we don't survive, at least they'll know this record that we were alive, and that we didn't die in the crash. So that's where these pictures come from. Their ordeal was just one thing after another. First there was a starvation for 10 days. They survived on those minimal rations. On the 10th day, they heard the radio. They had a little transistor radio, and they were listening to stations from Chile and Argentina that could pick up AM stations. And they heard that the search had been called off. After 10 days, they thought, there's no way anybody's going to survive. Yeah, so they called it off. So they knew they were completely screwed. You know, it was like, we either get ourselves out on our own, or we're going to die. So at that point, out of food and with that prospect, they realized that the only way they were going to survive was eating the bodies of the dead. Otherwise, it'd be certain starvation. So they made a difficult decision and started cutting into the bodies. First, a little bit of muscle and trying. It was very difficult for them. It was a huge taboo, and they hadn't heard of other people ever doing that before, other than cannibals, that they had heard, but no real cases that they could relate to. So it was very difficult for them, but it was that or death. So little by little, they started experimenting, trying, and they started saving the bodies under snow so they wouldn't decompose to preserve them. Next one. One of the things that they tried, there was one surviving member of the crew who was a mechanic, and even that was his title. He really was a carpenter that was in the army, that was kind of going on the plane as the mechanic, a little bit, but not that much. And he told them that they could make the radio work, call for help, if they could connect it to the battery. But the battery was in the tail. And there was no tail to be seen. So they started organizing expeditions, climbing from where the fuselage was up the mountain to look for the tail. And they never found it. They kept going up, and they realized how difficult it was to climb in deep snow. In the afternoons, they would soften up, and they would be up to their thighs in snow. And in their state, starving, they were very weak and in constant dehydration. So they couldn't find it. When the pilot died, one of the passengers found a map, one of the flight charts, and they saw on the chart, they found that Curicó was the town that the pilot kept mentioning. We passed Curicó before he died. So he said, look guys, this is where Curicó is. Curicó is in Chile. So we must be in Chile, and to the west of us must be the end of the mountains. If we go east, the compass of the plane still works. If we go east, we're just going to get deeper into the mountains. So that became their mantra, that to the west were the green valleys of Chile. But to the west, when they looked west, there was this huge mountain that they would have to climb to go over. So they started looking for ways to climb. They're like, well, it's going to be really impossible to climb that mountain. If we just tried to look for the tail and kicked our butts, these little hills, how are we going to climb that? So they thought, well, maybe the slope was going down towards the east. Maybe if we go down that side, the valley turns to the west, around that ridge that we see there. So they did an expedition to explore that side. And as they were going down, lower than the fuselage, they found the tail. Turned out that the tail, when the plane crashed, it hit the ridge, broke in two pieces, and both pieces went down that avalanche gully. And the fuselage kind of caught this little shelf of snow, while the tail went a little bit to the right where the slope keeps going down, and ended up about a mile further down than where the fuselage was. So when they were searching for that, they found the tail. That's where the two characters I mentioned before, Nando and Roberto, they found that. So they went back to the fuselage and they brought a friend of theirs well, what they tried to do is they located the batteries, and they tried to take out the batteries and go connect it to the radio. But it was too heavy. There was no way they were going to climb way back up to the fuselage with the battery. So they thought, well, why don't we bring the radio to the battery? So they went back up. This is Roy Harley. Roy Harley was they call him their radio man, because he was the only one that had any experience with sound equipment or wires or anything. But you saw live, you see him saying, all I did was help my dad plug in some speakers with a stereo. I don't have any experience. So the poor guy was like, you know, he was losing so much weight. He was very weak. So he didn't want to go. And they're like, you're going. You're the one that knows the most. That's it. You're going. And they brought him down. And here he is. First they had to take out the radio, and it came with tons of wires. Like this. Okay. These are wires from the plane. So it had like hundreds of these little wires. And if you'll notice, if you look at it later, there's almost no markings or almost nothing. So it was like all these wires come off. He gets here, and there's another 100 wires there. And here, poor Roy is trying to connect the radio to the battery, and it's just like, it was an impossible task. And it was never going to work, it turns out later, because there was some kind of, one was AC, the other one was, it were not compatible, the currents. There needed to be some hardware in between them to make them work. But here he's desperately trying to make it work. This picture you're going to be seeing a lot because there's a lot of very important details in this picture. You can see, for starters, that Nando's eating. And you can see that Roberto has this on his leg. And he's got a little piece of glass here. So this is a little bit of human flesh, and they're cutting small slivers, and they're eating right here while Roy works on the radio. You can also see in this picture that they found this insulating material. And they thought, you know what, if we're going to skate, we're going to need some kind of sleeping bag to survive the night, or we're going to die. So, and this insulation material was very warm. So they took a bunch of that material back up to the plane. Next one. This is Nando and Roberto. They selected among the survivors as the days progressed. You know, weeks went by. One thing I'll mention: an avalanche came down on them. They're inside the fuselage. They finally figured out how to melt water. They were eating from the bodies. They were drying the human flesh on top of the plane to make it a little more palatable. They had a system going, and then an avalanche came down. They had a few days of snow, and then that same avalanche gully that helped them survive avalanched and brought down, completely covered the fuselage. Inside the fuselage was, the snow went in from the slope and kind of partially filled it up and left part of it open inside. And then another avalanche came out and just completely covered it. So they were like a submarine underwater out of power. You know, they were just, when the avalanche came, it started suffocating everybody. Roy was one of the few guys that was sleeping on a sort of a hammock they made on the luggage compartment, and he was able to help get some of them out. Eduardo was asphyxiating. He remembers, you know, feeling like he was going to die, and he felt peace. He said, finally, that all this suffering is going to be over, you know, and because he could feel he was asphyxiating. And all of a sudden, somebody took snow out of his face, and air rushed in, and he felt this. The way he describes it is, he felt this urge to live, you know, that like it was, and so he fought and got out of there. And his best friend, the captain of the team, Marcelo Perez, was right next to him. And by the time they got to him, he had died. And 8 people died that night in the avalanche. So the number kept shrinking of survivors. You know, and so at this point, after the avalanche, you know, they got the snow out as soon as they could. They spent 3 days in that little bit of space between snow and just the ceiling of the fuselage, until they started noticing that their lighters didn't work. They had a lot of cigarettes. Somebody had brought boxes of cigarettes, and so they would smoke. It was like the only pleasure they had. And they started noticing that they couldn't light the cigarettes. They were running out of air, oxygen. So they had to use one of the poles that was used to on the luggage compartment. There was this netting and these poles to kind of poke a hole through the roof and get air. Finally, make it through the snow and get some air in. And then eventually, as it started melting and everything, they dug a tunnel and they started digging snow out, got the bodies out. But in those 3 days, they had to now eat not just the bodies they lost the bodies that were outside. Now they had to eat the friends that they were just alive. So it was like just one thing after another. It was getting worse and worse and worse. So as its temperatures got better, it was later in the spring, they started planning their expedition. They realized the radio wasn't going to work. There was no rescue. So they selected the strongest members, and Roberto and Nando were very strong and healthy at that point. Nando, surprisingly, was in a coma for 2 days after the crash. He hit his head, and he had a concussion, and unconscious for like 24 hours, 48 hours, and then he came back to life. Came out of the coma, and the doctors think that the ice on the brain, on the open skull, actually helped him reduce the swelling and saved his life. And he recovered amazingly well, and he became one of the strongest. He was one of the strongest rugby players anyway, but he got healthy. So they selected them two and a third person called Tintin, Antonio Vicentin. Next one. So in the end, what happened was that, actually, let me go back. What happened was after weeks and weeks, they tried different things. They realized they had to plan the expedition very well, so they made a sleeping bag. Do you have the slide of the fuselage? Do I have it right there? In this slide, you can see Roberto right here, Nando seeing here, wearing that red hat, which is actually red underwear that he would wear. And here is the insulation material. Carlitos is actually sewing this big bag that they made for the three of them. And they're sewing it with wire off the plane. So wire and that insulation material made a 3-person sleeping bag for Nando, Roberto, and Vicentin. All right, let's go back. So they started on their journey, and I'm going to show you pictures of the journey they did because I retraced the escape route in 2005. So I'll go back to that incredible expedition. But they basically climbed up, since they were saying to the west of Chile, they climbed up to the west. What they didn't realize is they were in Argentina, and to the west was the crest of the Andes, the continental divide, the spine of the Andes, and then they had to descend all the way. So they were in the middle of the Andes, and they got to the top, and they saw that they were surrounded by snowy peaks, no green valleys, just Andes, snow, rock, and ice everywhere. And I'll show you pictures. So it was an incredible journey, which I'll talk in detail. 10 days later, they finally connect they pass the snow, and they finally connect with they see a Chilean peasant, cowboy. You got his cattle, whose name is Sergio Catalan. And he's the one that sent for help, notified the local carabineros, which is sort of like the army there. They notified the authorities and connected with the people that were searching for the plane originally. And so helicopters came the next day. And finally, in December 22nd, 72 days, 71 days, December 21st, next picture, please. They brought helicopters, and Nando had to get on the helicopter, terrified of flying, going over the Andes, and direct him to find the fuselage. And so here it is, the moment when the folks from the helicopter are taking a picture of the survivors. Here's Eduardo, and they can't believe they actually are being saved. Next slide. Here's Eduardo coming out. They brought him down to Los Maitenes, where they found the arriero, or the Chilean cowboy, and these are the Huey helicopters of the Chilean Air Force that were used for the rescue. And he's coming out of the elevators, his cousin Daniel Fernandez. Eduardo and his cousins, they were older. There were 3 estranged cousins, and they sort of became the leaders of the group when the captain died, because they were older, they were very smart, very down to earth, very calm, and so they helped sort of calm everybody down and help them plan everything. Nando was obsessed with leaving. Nando had lost his mother and his sister on the crash. They were with him on the plane. He had invited them, and they died. So he was obsessed with, I'm just leaving, I'm going, and I'm going to let my father know that I'm alive. And he would have left way before, but they held him down and said, no, you're just going to die. We have to plan an expedition. We have to equip you. We have to somehow. So they did all kinds of clothing, borrowed sunglasses from the pilots, created, they wore makeup to protect from the makeup that some women had in their protect from the sun, sunburn. They created all kinds of equipment and systems of doing this. And it was successful. Here's Roberto greeting his friends coming down from the mountain. And a few days later, back, they call it the Christmas miracle when they made it back December 23rd, 24th, and to Montevideo. Next one. So, of course, when the news broke out, the media got a hold of this, and so when they came out of the helicopters, there were tons of reporters from all over the world, BBC and this and that, and then finally, some of the rescuers that went up there took a picture, and they took a picture of the fuselage, and in that picture you could see his human legs here. There's a foot here, and there's 2 feet right there. And so there were some bodies left. This is where they would keep the bodies next to the entrance, and they would keep it covered in snow, but it's melting. And so it became a huge scandal, and that's why the story became so world-renowned. All of a sudden, the story of how they survived by eating the bodies of the dead. So it's a huge deal. Next. So the way I became connected with this story, when I grew up in Mexico, my other fascination besides Popocatépetl, like Julian said, was was the story of the Andes survivors. Because
So what route did they take over the end?
I will show you. I will show you in detail. So, because the first movie that was ever made about the survivors was called Supervivientes de los Andes. In English, it was called Survive. It was a Mexican movie, pretty bad movie, but the story was so good that it impacted a lot of people. It was dubbed in English with subtitles, so a lot of people saw it. So, I was a guide in 2005. I was my first trip guiding in Aconcagua, and I knew that somewhere near there is where the accident had happened. So I had found out that you could go there, that there were people that could take you up there on horses. So after guiding Aconcagua, I came here, and I asked the guy that provided the horses, could I explore? Could I take a look and climb? And that's the beauty that it was Argentina. If it would have been the United States, it would have been like, oh, no, it's a matter of liability. We can't let you do this. We can't let you do that. And we wouldn't be here. And none of this would have happened. But there is like, oh, well, if another gringo kills himself doing crazy stuff, it's not our problem. Who cares? So, sure, yeah, you can climb. You can do whatever you want. So I showed up there, and one of the horse guides and I left. We were with another group of people it was a weekend trip to visit this place, and you access this place by 4x4s and then horses for 2 days in the middle of summer. This is February 12th. So, but the horse guide and I went ahead of the rest of the group. The rest of the group went with another horse guide. We got here, I took a picture. This is the cross where they buried the dead in parts of the airplane as it looked in 2005. Next. And this is to explain to you where everything happened. The plane hit. This plane was flying from behind, and it hit this saddle right here, this little saddle. And it slid down this gully. Well, I could probably turn that. But the natural fall line somewhere around here. And slid down, and here's where it changes the angle, and it hits this flatter snow and fuselage stop somewhere around here, down here. So that's the 2,000 vertical feet that it slid down from 14,200 to about 12,000. Now, the cross, when the rescuers came to clean up after, I don't know if everybody can see, down here is where the fuselage was. So, a month after they were rescued, in January 1973, they came and they cleaned up the mess. It was kind of an embarrassment for the Uruguayan Air Force. So, they cleaned up the rest of the bodies, and the first solid ground they found where they could bury them was along this moraine. All this was covered, but this moraine had like this little point over here sticking out of dirt. They could see that it was firm, that it was actual earth, not just glaciated terrain like this. So they took the bodies, the remains, and they buried them there and put that cross that you see on the previous picture. So that's the memorial cross. The fuselage was here. This is the impact point, and the survivors escaped this way. And I'll show you the pictures what it looks like for the west. Next. So, one more. So, and that 12th of February 2005, the Argentinian guide's name is Mario Perez, Mario and I, after visiting the cross, we climbed on the moraine. Back then it was a very dry summer. I took this picture later on a different expedition when I was climbing. So this was dry. This had melted all the way to the rocks. There was some snow here. This moraine was all dry too. So we went from the cross, went here, we started finding artifacts, parts of the plane, as we climbed up here. And everybody thought that the plane, if you look from down here, you see this side, or that ridge line. You can't see that. So when we were climbing up, everybody thought the plane had hit here and slid down this way. That was the accepted theory back then, before 2005. As we climbed up, we found airplane parts, and when we got to this point, I found a piece that, to me, it seemed like it was coming from this gully. It was too far to the right. This doesn't look like it would come from here. And I told Mario, why don't we explore? Mario had never been up here. He was just a guy, horses bringing people to the memorial. He didn't have mountaineering gear, so he was following me. I had an ice axe and mountaineering boots, so I was chopping a few steps on the snow for him and helping him get up there. So, but I told Mario, why don't we explore this goal? That's where I had a lot of guts to dare to think, what if that theory is wrong? What if they've been wrong all these? What if the plane came down this way? So we explored this, and sure enough, we found all kinds of debris here, including an engine of the plane. And right about here, at 14,200, next picture, we found blue clothing sticking out of the rocks. And as we uncovered, I gave my camera to Mario, and Mario started taking these pictures. And as I uncovered this blue clothing, it turned out to be a coat, a blue coat. And inside there was a passport and a wallet. And when I opened it, it said Eduardo Strauch, and had the years 1965. Strauch, you could read it. 1960, it was 1966 when the passport was made. And there was his driver's license. And that is not my finger. This is my finger. That's Mario's finger. Everybody's like, what is wrong with this finger? Just so you know. It's the infamous finger. That picture has been all over. They've reprinted so much. Next picture. So what happened to that coat is Eduardo got on the plane, sat over there, took his coat up, he has his documents there, and he put it on the shelf. As you can see, the plane has shelves, like everybody put in their coats like that. He put his somewhere in here, like one of these coats. And then when the plane hit the ridge, broke, decompressed, the coat went flying and landed. Next one. Landed up there in this gully that had melted this year of 2005 all the way to the rock at about 14,000 feet, 200 feet from the impact point, and it stayed there for 33 years. Most of the years covered in snow and ice. But I was lucky enough to be there at the right place, and we found it. We found all their clothing, some pants, corduroy pants. We found a roll of film, which unfortunately was ruined, so I didn't have any pictures. This is my gloves, this is the coat. And so that's, next picture. It was incredible, to find this and realize that this belonged to one of the survivors. So eventually, through the owner of the horse guiding service, he had the phone number of the survivors because they had come for a documentary, a Discovery Channel documentary. So we called Eduardo Strauch. This is Eduardo Strauch, the owner of the coat. And we eventually met. I was able to give him back his wallet and coat and everything. And we became really close friends. We hit it off. He's an artist, painter, architect, painter. He loves music, like singing. He's not a musician, but he loves arts and music. So as an artist and me as a musician, we kind of connect too. And also we both love the mountains. He still loves the mountains. Just there's something special for him, a connection for him of being in the mountains, even though he suffered a lot. Next one. So what I found out on that trip is that the escape route had never been repeated. And so I thought, well, we got to do this. This is like a perfect National Geographic type of expedition. And I contacted National Geographic, couldn't get it with anybody. I contacted everybody, Time magazine, anybody I could think outside magazine. I wouldn't get anywhere because I didn't have contacts. Eventually, after 8 months of hard work, the director of the Colorado Mountain Club, said, I got a friend who's the editor of Backpacker magazine. He would love your story. Because I told him what we found and everything. I wanted to share that story and also see if there were connections with National Geographic. Because I thought this would be a perfect project for them. So he connected me with me. He loved the story. They printed a story in Backpacker magazine. And then he connected me with a writer, James Lajos from National Geographic. He said, and he finally connected me to the National Geographic Expedition Council, who loved the idea. Once you go through the big door, through real connections, you can get somewhere. And they loved it, and they sponsored expedition. So with the grant from National Geographic, James Lajos and I, and Mario Perez, I invited him out of loyalty since we had found the code together. The three of us decided to do this expedition. James and I flew to Montevideo first to interview Nando and Roberto to reconstruct the escape route and everything. Here we are with Nando Parrado, Eduardo, an aerial picture of the Andes and a photo of the cross in the valley. And we spoke for hours with Nando. Next one. We also spoke with Roberto Canessa. We used Google Earth in its infancy. It was just 2005. It was just starting to work well enough to use it for this. And we kind of reconstructed where they had gone down, what was the route that they followed. So we went, after Montevideo, we flew to Argentina. And this is December 12th. About 10th or 11th. The rivers were pretty high and everything, so we had to cross rivers. Next one. Using it on foot, then using a boat. These folks rented us this boat and helped us cross this. Next one. And we met with horses on the other side that they had brought days before. And then horses brought us up, because we had to get to where the plane had crashed from the Argentinian side. And that was in itself an expedition. Next. So the horses took us as far as we could, and then we did it expedition style, kind of like Denali style. We had a couple of sleds with food and gear and our backpacks. The Argentinian horse handlers left us there. Said, "Good luck, goodbye," and that was it. We had to make it because they went back and there was no returning. They were like 60 miles from where they lived. We had used a 4x4 across on those boats, and the guys had come from their village with the horses because they couldn't cross the rivers. And they were going back to their villages. So that was it. We had to make it. And that was true adventure. It was like, this route had not been done in 33 years. And it was a do-or-die situation. And I was leading that expedition, so it felt pretty responsible. And what am I getting myself into? What if the terrain has changed? So here we had to go. You can see, here's the impact point. This is the glacier where the plane was. And this is the escape slope they had to climb to cross the Chile on the other side. Next. So once we got to where the plane was, this is what it looked like. This is December 13th. To the west, this is what they saw. I don't think they saw these crevasses from what they told me. They didn't know there were crevasses. But it was snow, and they had a little more rock exposed. These rock bands were more exposed. And Roberto and Nando told me that the first night they went from the fuselage. This is about 3,000 vertical feet we're seeing from here, 12,000 to almost 15,000 feet, 14,800. So the first day they made it to here, second day to here, and the third day they finally made it there. When the survivors saw their slow progress, they were like, wow, what's taking them so long? They didn't realize how big the mountain was and how difficult it was to climb all that. So, and when, next picture. So this is the view to the east. To the east, this is why I wasn't encouraging to go out towards the east. The east is where we came in. We came in from a village in Argentina, and we took this valley, and this is how we came up. It was all uphill this way. They could have gone all downhill that way, but there were river crossings. If they would have made it to the Atuel River, the main river that runs that way, they would still be 40 miles from the nearest village. And so who knows if it would have worked. And also, the way they saw it, there was this mountain is about 17,000 feet high, almost 18,000, this is El Sosnelo. I think it's the last 5,000 meter peak in the Andes when you're going south. So this giant mountain showed like there would be no passage this way, and like you were heading into the Andes. Didn't realize that that way was open to the Argentinian pampas, the plains. But it's still a long way. So they went with what they knew. That the pilot said that we passed Curicó. The pilot was mistaken. They had not passed Curicó. They were in Argentina. That's the only information they had. Next one. This is looking south from where the fuselage was. The plane, this is why everybody assumed the plane had hit here, because there's a famous picture in the book Alive with the track of the fuselage going up like that in this year. So it would look like it would come from there. But really they hit over here and slid down this way. It doesn't look feasible from this understanding to see the avalanche path. Next. Show you this picture again. You're going to see this a few times, because I will show you how the glaciers have melted, but also this is how we located the exact spot where the fuselage was. This is the only spot where this ridge, these lines, these ridges, this rock that looks like a submarine, and this ridge all line up in this way. This is about a quarter of a mile behind them, and this is about a mile and a half behind them. So this is, you don't see that from here to there is a huge valley. Next picture. Here's us in the exact spot. You know, I even put Mario in the same position as show the picture before, please. Yeah. Just kind of like get a perspective where, and I'm standing sort of where Roberto. Next. The fuselage is gone, obviously. What happened with the rescuers, once they buried the bodies, you know, it was a mess. There was blood, there was dried blood, there was skin, bones, everything. So they couldn't potentially clean. There was no way to clean everything. So they doused gasoline and burned the rest of the fuselage. And so in the shell of it, as the snow melted, kind of stayed on it. It melted into this pedestal, and that shell, burnt shell, slid down at some point with one of the avalanches. Fell into a crevasse. From what we know, it was seen in the 90s inside a crevasse, and then it disappeared. So we haven't seen it since then. But airplane parts are still visible. Next. Now, to climb to the west, this is what we found. And there was this hanging glacier that was avalanching every day. The day before, it had you could see fresh avalanche debris. And in order to climb it, we had to go around this huge crevasse. It was actually, it doesn't look big, but it was, you know, that's 8 feet wide, but very deep. So we had to go all the way around, get under expose ourselves to this, which is a Russian roulette, because we saw it avalanche in the day, and we heard it at night also. So we didn't know when the next one was coming. We had to go around, then around this avalanche, and then get onto this really loaded slope, which was, I dug a little pit and tested, and it looked like it could slide. So once I crossed these, I was like, well, this is not the conditions I wanted. It's not ideal, but this is it. We're here. If we want to retrace escape route, we kind of have to do this. And so let's just hope this doesn't go, and I went for it. You know, next picture. And here we are. And by the time there's the avalanche debris. Mario behind me, and James got ahead to take this picture. I had to break trail because for pretty much the whole climb, they tried breaking trail, but it quickly realized with all our heavy packs, it was brutal with all the deep snow, and they weren't strong, so I ended up in the lead the whole day, and it was just exhausting. And we couldn't camp in the middle like they did, because it was avalanche prone that whole. So there was nowhere. I wasn't going to dig a platform in such unstable snow, so I just pushed all the way to the high point. Next. And one of the things I was very curious is to see what they saw when they got to that saddle, that view that you see in the movie. Describe they finally get up there, instead of the green valleys of Chile, they see snow everywhere in high peaks. And I was like, what did they, I was very curious. These poor guys, what did they see? And this is what they saw. I got there and to the west, they saw snowy peaks everywhere. In every direction, it was snowy peaks everywhere. And in the distance, they describe these two peaks. They say these two peaks that didn't have snow. We are here, and this photo was taken December 15th, the same day they were there, December 15th. We did it in the same days too, and it was a year of heavy snow, so it was very similar conditions. So we found the very similar conditions, all snowy peaks except for these two peaks. And I thought, well, and this valley looks like it goes down. Maybe it opens to there. That must be the end of the Andes. So that was one of those moments of incredible bravery where they went into the unknown. And they're like, I mean, Roberto says, we're like, well, you know what, we're going to die. But it's either we go back to the fuselage and die with everybody else. And Nando said to me, what if I'm the last person to die? What if I watch all my friends die and everything, and then I'm the last? It's like, I can't bear with it. I'd rather die trying to get out of here. And so, and Roberto said, yeah, I need you to come with me. They sent Tintin back because they realized it was going to be a lot longer than they thought. And they had provisions they had calculated for a few days, 5-6 days, meaning human flesh put in socks. And that was it. That was the food that they had. And they had some bottles they had brought to melt snow in. So they sent him back to keep his food, and they went into the unknown. And a heroic journey where they contacted that Chilean cowboy. Next picture. So we camped on top of this. I realized how important it was that they had, if you read the book, you realize that they had perfect weather the whole time. It was sunny and no wind. Nando talks about, I can't believe I'm on top of this big mountain and there's no wind. And when we got up there, it was very windy and the wind chills were really, you could see I'm wearing a huge down jacket. And from the exhaustion of climbing and breaking trail, I almost got hypothermic. This is the next morning. But when I arrived here the evening before, and I couldn't warm up, and so Mario helped me with the stove. I couldn't make it work. Your brain starts getting foggy when you get too cold, and I couldn't make it work. And he got hot cocoa going. And finally, I warmed up. But I realized that if they were wearing jeans, they were wearing cotton and wool sweaters. If they hadn't had, there was a lot of things that happened that were lucky for them to survive, and good weather was one of them. They would have died so easily. And they were incredibly strong and smart the way they played their cards. Next morning we took this picture. Next day we went down, and it's very rugged terrain, icy, rocky. The disadvantage we had was we were carrying a lot of 10 days worth of food, tents, crampons, rope, gear. We didn't know what we were going to find if we had to do any rappels or anything. Some little bit of hardware. Shovels, pickets, crampons, so we were very heavy, and that made it very hard on us. But of course, we were mountaineers, we were well fed, we're not well nourished, so it's amazing what they did. Next one. As you go down these steep slopes in Chile, they open into these huge valleys, and just to give you a sense of scale of what the size of these valleys, you can see Mario here got a hand a little bit. Right there. And these are just gigantic mountains. That's James coming down. I took this picture. We did their journey that they did in 10 days or 9 days. We did it in 5 days. But it was tough. It was very tough. Next. As the valley turns, you finally see the end of the glaciers and the snow. And I remembered, next picture, Roberto talking about when he left snow. He said, I've watched all my friends die in the snow. This is the line between death and life. If I'm out of this frozen hell, I'm going to live. That's how he encouraged himself. So I took this picture for Roberto. I'll show it to him later when we finally freed the snow. Next. So as you make a turn, then these more huge valleys open up, and it's just endless. And next picture. The terrain, the total mileage they did from the fuselage to where they found the arriero was 37 miles, but that number is hard to relate to if you think of a trail runner in Colorado can do that in one day. But that's on trails, that's on established routes, logical routes. This terrain is very rugged. There was tons of terrain like this, rock. This is not a logical route. It was just they just went west and they escaped after it got over the saddle, the crest of the Andes. They followed drainage, so it was very tough. Carrying our heavy packs with this was tough. I took a fall at one point, the next, and cut my arm and everything. It was delicate because any serious injury, we had no rescue or anything. So luckily, it was just a scratch. Not a scratch. I mean, for a second, I thought it would be like a compound fracture because I saw some white show up, and it hurt terrible. So I thought, did I break my arm? but it was just like a little bit of fatty tissue showing through here, and it was just a wound, and I bandaged it. So luckily, at least you can see the bandage there. And so the terrain was just relentless. Even when the rock started, it was like steep and rugged. And so those 37 miles are very, very tough miles. It feels a lot longer. Next. And it went from almost 15,000 to about 4,000 feet. Finally, when they get to Chile, it's about 4,000 something, they got to this point where this river is joined by another river, and they couldn't, it felt trapped because they couldn't go in any direction because there was cliffs here. By the time they made it over there was a river joining. But that's, when they were about here, they saw that arriero that you saw in the picture, that Chilean cowboy over here. Mm. And they yell at him, and they're like, hey, you know, finally connected with him, and that's where they finally, you know, let him know they needed help. He went and searched for help. There's a bridge on this peninsula over here, and he came from the bridge and helped them. Next picture. And this is where they spent their first night. That cabin was still up in 2005. And there were some beds. And these are little cabins that the arrieros use when they get up there. When they're bringing their cattle up, they sleep in these little huts. So that's where they had their first food and first sleep in bed. And next. One thing we did when we were approaching the airplane was look for the tail. So, because the tail is an important part of the story. Next. So wait, the picture before, sorry. This is El Sosneado. When we were climbing through here, we realized, you know, somewhere around here is where the tail should be, according to what the survivors told us and everything. Next photo. Going back to this very telling picture, I noticed this corner of this ridge and these lines. And this, according to this, I figured that might be El Sosneado, that mountain, that last 5,000 meter peak. So we searched and searched until I actually found, just on this little corner, I found this, because I had this picture with me on the expedition. Next. And here it is, the ridge, the lines, and that little corner. So we figured, okay, this is where the tail was. This is in December. Now everything is covered in snow. So we had a second expedition with National Geographic to search for the fuselage and everything when there was less snow, and to bring Eduardo for the first time to the actual site. So when we came back, we looked and we found a few artifacts. Next. We brought Eduardo to the glacier for the first time, to where the fuselage was. You can see the submarine rock, the place with it was pretty crevassed back then. That's why you see him in this rope. That was the thing, you know, you can't kill one of the Andes survivors. You're a guy, you have to make sure he stays alive, you know. You can't die on your watch. So I was very careful to keep him safe. Next. So based on that picture, I went and looked below the point where Nando was sitting. There was a cliff, and I had read that the tail, they were afraid the tail might fall because it was steep behind. And sure enough, at the bottom of that cliff, I found this, which was the door of the tail. Next one. If you look at this picture, you can see the door right here. And the back side of this door, go back one, please. One more. Is this. Here's the door. And in this door, you found a little plate, which is like the VIN of your car, the identification plate. And some of these are here, you know, a lot of what we find, it's going to the museum, in the Andes Museum in Uruguay. But we keep a few pieces here in the United States that have for occasions like this, so we can show them. So this is, believe it or not, this is actually the identification plate, which you can see after the presentation if you want to look up close, of the Fairchild 571. You can see how it says, it's right here, 571, and Fairchild Hillard. That's why FH. So it was just amazing to find the identifying plate of the plane. And next. So we did find the remains of the tail, but the tail had come down, the door stayed there, and then where the tail was, water melts and created a river, and it just dragged it down about a quarter of a mile, and it was just being destroyed by the river. And so we found it in just this big chunks of metal under the water. To give a sense of scale, I stood right here so you could see The tail used to be here. That's where we matched the photographs with Nando. The door was right there. And then throughout the years, the tail had been dragged down. And now it's disappeared completely. Now, when we go visit this place, every year that we go on the expeditions, there's nothing left. Next. So, came out in the article, National Geographic Adventure on April 2006. The work that we did. Next one. And so after 2006, Eduardo and I started doing expeditions, going to the site. And so I had the chance to explore, to climb more and explore while we'd go in there. We bring people from many places of the world. I also get a chance to climb and try different things here and search for, and we found a lot of artifacts. And with the global warming, it's been melting more and more, and a lot of stuff that's been buried in snow since the 70s is now coming out. Next. This is one of the pictures of one of the last year and a half ago. Here's Juliana, my wife, who introduced me, and the Explorers Club hat. Eduardo Strauch. This is me, and this are our clients that we brought from different parts. Here's the memorial. Next. So we found all kinds of interesting parts of the plane. This is near the impact point. This is the rotor of the plane. Next. This was very interesting to see that material that I showed you, this same material, but sewn together with wire to make a larger blanket. And that's how they would survive the cold nights. They would use one big blanket and the cushions underneath and just all huddle together and survive those cold temperatures. Next. Part of the stabilizer. The stabilizers are the little wings behind in the tail. This is one of those with those narrow behind. Next. You can see the letters of the plane. It was painted saying Fuerza Aérea, Air Force. Next. One of the antennas of the plane. Next. This seat, we found a lot of parts of the seats, and if you want to look at this up close, next I brought it, and you can see kind of like, so now it's very interesting just to see that. It just brings it, to realize that it was real, this really happened, and the forces of the crash are all frozen in a moment, twisted metal in every part of the plane. Just what happened that today, 50 years ago, how it just turned into this, and bent all this metal, and it stayed like that for 50 years. Next. This find, you can also see that up close here if you want. This was significant because it's a little toothpaste, those travel toothpaste with a little cap. For them, this was like the most amazing dessert. It was like such a treat. They had something sweet. They would mix it with a little bottle they had found of rum, a little bit of paste in that, and it was just, they conserved it best they could and ate very little bits. And when you see it, if you want to see it up close, it's so squeezed out. It's absolutely empty. I mean, you can tell they got every ounce of it. Next. Part of this one is in the museum in Uruguay. It's a belt that we found. You can see it. I don't know if it's, how it ripped or if it burned. There was no fire in the crash, but it's probably, it was just ripped, and then the glacier and the water and the elements for all those years. And the pieces look like they come from the Titanic, they're being on the snow. They're just all kind of rusted. And you can see this one, for instance. This is the air and the light that you have on there. You can direct the air in the little reading light. So yeah, if you feel welcome, you're welcome to come look at it after. Next. And then because of all my trips there, I've become very well, I researched the place more than anybody has done. I discovered the true impact point of the fuselage. It turned out I was right, the old theories were wrong, because the other gully has nothing. And the gully that I explored is where all the evidence is. So they've hired me to do a lot of documentaries that we were filming here, Stranded. I brought 4 survivors. Roberto Canes is here. And again, I haven't, you can see it was, this is in 2006. Still crevasses. You're going to see how this glacier melted in my next few pictures. Just have a few more pictures to show. but I had the honor of bringing them, doing some filming. Next. 2010, we came with Eduardo and a film crew, an American film crew, and they filmed the documentary I Am Alive, Surviving the Andes Plane Crash, which I highly recommend if you want a real good documentary on the story. History Channel bought that and they released it, so it's a History Channel, I Am Alive. I'll have it on the screen at the end, the link or the title. So we filmed this. This was an incredible adventure for me, experience for me. You know, I was a big fan of the story. I never thought I would meet the survivors, let alone become sort of this little part of the story and help film documentaries about them. Next. So here they're interviewing. You'll see an interview in the movie, Eduardo being interviewed at high camp over there by the cross. In this picture, I'm next to him, but in the documentary, you'll just see the interview of him right there. I'm just outside of the shot. Next.
You're not really that red, it's just how it's showing up.
Yeah, we did some of the filming in Angel Fire, New Mexico. They made a mock fuselage. You can see the trees. That's the view. No, you're not in the Andes. They filmed it from certain angles so that to avoid the trees. Next. And then I had to do some stunt work for the climbing shots. So I'm dressed like Nando Parrado here. We try to match the clothing the best I could. I don't have a red underwear like he does, but it's a red hat instead. He had, what are these glasses called? Ray-Bans. He had Ray-Bans. He wore soccer, the cleats, you remember the plastic cleats from the 70s that soccer teams used to wear? Those were the rugby shoes. And so I found a pair that was just like theirs and wore plastic boots. He wore plastic bags over his socks to keep his feet dry. So look at the next picture, and you'll see back to this historic picture. There his rugby shoes, the plastic bags, and he told me that he was wearing several pairs of pants. So underneath there were jeans and everything. He told me this was the way he was dressed when he went out on the expedition too. This is when they're in the film. There's the red underwear. And the little red shoe. If you remember the movie, they talk about the shoe. They said when he went on an expedition, he gave the other shoe to one of the younger guys that was losing his spirit. You know, he was feeling. He said, "Look, I'm going to take this shoe, and when I come back, when these two shoes are a pair, you're going to be going home. So hang in there." And sure enough, when he came back in the helicopter, he showed him the shoe. And so that's the significance of that shoe. Next. There they are when they finished that expedition. You see the Ray-Ban glasses, the sweaters that Roberto was wearing. Next. Oh, by the way, show the picture what I'm dressed with for you since you're local. So I'm in Flagstaff Mountain here in Boulder. And we did some, you know those pullovers where you can do some scrambling? I did some rock climbing with these shoes. They filmed it, looking at the sky and the rock, and then in the documentary they put like mountains behind, so it looks like I'm rock climbing in the Andes. It's amazing. Going forward, showing Roberto's sweaters next. Then here I am dressed like Roberto. Why? And we are near Loveland Pass to film like this steep head wall. You know, I found slopes that were going. If you go on the west side of Loveland Pass, it's a little peak, and there's these steep slopes right here that a lot of people practice crevasse rescue. So because it's got its cornice and everything. So we climbed there. It was steep enough snow, and I was wearing the same clothes. It was very interesting to be wearing those clothes and shoes in climbing in snow with a pole, no crampons and everything. It was the filming. You'll see in the documentary. I take a fall, and I slid down and stopped myself with a pole to show some of what Nando describes. Unfortunately, the shot is one of those cases where the shot looks like nothing, but it was a lot more dangerous than it looks. It's the other way. It's usually supposed to do stuff that's not as dangerous as it looks, but it was. I was very impressed with how they climbed like that. It's like, man, that was really exposing their lives. It was truly heroic what they did. Next, here he is with his white hat, sweaters, right after he came out of the end with the medics. And this is Mount. I don't know if you recognize the 14ers there.
Ah, Graves and Torres.
Yeah. Of course, Jerry Roach would recognize. There it is, Graves and Torres, Bierstadt, the Sawtooth Ridge, Evans. So this, selected this location. I helped the director select the best locations to do filming for the recreations. And I selected Evans because of the access. It was June, the road was open, but there was plenty of snow. So the crew could get up to here. This is the Mount Evans Road. This is one of those turns, near the summit. They could go here and film. It was cold. The actors could feel the altitude and everything, and it could simulate the Andes. So this is they're filming the moment when Nando and Roberto get to the saddle and look and realize there's no green valleys of Chile, but it's the Andes. And in the documentary you'll see this, and then you'll see the actual picture, which I think I included here. All right. Did I put another picture there? No? Okay. So, which is the picture I showed you before. You'll see then they show actual view, yeah, next. So, in the last few years, the glaciers have been melting dramatically, and we found more and more stuff. Here's the landing gear, the main landing gear of the plane. Next. And this is what we found too. We find clothing, shoes, and we found human remains. Because the people that cleaned up, there were layers of body parts and everything, as they had been there 72 days, so a lot of the bodies had been buried. And so what comes out nowadays is you see pieces of skin, bones. This is one of the bones of the arms. This is skin, another bone. All this is skin. So it's such a dramatic reminder, like this really happened. People were really here. I found at one point a finger, these two fingers, from a woman, and there were only 5 female passengers. Because you can tell with fine fingers and everything, and it was and you could see that they're eaten all the way to like the knuckle, because they would eat everything they could. The hands were free. They would ration the rest of the body, but the hands, everybody was welcome to grab a hand and work on it. And so it was like what they had to go through was unbelievable, and this just brings it to life. When you're there and you find this. Next. Here's Juliana again. This is the front wheel of the plane, and it's recognizable as single front wheel from the historic pictures. You should see in the next picture, right here. See, it was attached to the fuselage, so we knew we were close to where the fuselage should have been. And the seats, there's the seats and all. You can see how a lot of it is, human parts and everything. This is when they were rescued. Next. A wing sticking out of the ice in the glacier, part of a wing. This is through many years. We've been going back since 2006 until this year. So we found different stuff, and as the glacier melts more and more, we find more parts. Next. Another blanket Juliana and I found in 2018. Notice how the glacier now is changing. There's the lines, and the submarine rock would be there. And now this glacier is now that dirty type of glacier where there's ice underneath and it's just covering the snow. And rocks in the summer, it looks like that more often than not. Next. So to finish, I will just show you the change throughout the years. Because I've been going since 2006, I have actually a record of how it looks every year, the same views and everything. This is November 1972. Next. Here's March 2006. It wasn't that dramatic a change. This is the end of summer when they had the least amount of snow in 2006. It was still pretty. The glacier still had crevasses. You could see still glaciated around the rock, the submarine shaped rock. And now look at the change since 2006. January 2018. This is January. Only 1 month into the summer there. And it's now, there's still a glacier under all this rock, but it's like, the glacier has diminished. It's like shrinking in size, and now all the dirt and debris is accumulating on top. Notice how the glacier around that rock is melted too. Next. Now January 11 this year, 2022. Now this is completely gone. This is even deeper. Still glacier there, but it's much steeper. You can see the edge of the glacier here.
Yeah.
And this is the moraine. And remember and this is actually, here's the landing gear. And there were actually a group of hikers that were exploring there. To give a sense of scale. When the cleanup crew buried the bodies in the cross, which is over here, like over here, they just walked straight to that little point that was exposed. Now there's this huge gap, like this valley has created, the glacier has melted, And that the cross is now really high. It looks really high compared to the glacier. Next. And I'll show you this view. This is the cross looking west. That's how it was when they climbed it. The first night, the second night, and when they finally crossed to Chile. And this where you can actually see the fuselage right there. This picture was taken by the cleanup crew after they buried the remains. They put that cross, which is still there, and they took this picture. January 18, 1973. So now we can compare January to January. So all the pictures you'll see are in the same month. So you can really see the changes next. January 15, 2016. Now you can see how the glacier is sunken. There's much more rock exposed. The moraine shows more. Next. January 18, 2018. Getting deeper here. This is getting bigger. Same cross. It's a lot more rock exposed. That's the hanging glacier, by the way, that when we did the escape route, this is where we had to go through the crevasses, and that was where we're exposed to that. We had a lot more snow than back then. And it was unique that we did it in that year because we were able to experience the same conditions as they did, which now it's impossible. So we really capture a good moment to document that historic expedition. Next. And here it is, January 12th, 2022, this year. And it's like just this little bit of glacier left. And there's still glacier, but it's just like so deep and so melted. So it's really sad, I mean, to see, and you see this everywhere, glaciers all over the world. There's no doubt global warming is happening, and it's real, and it's. So we're going to be doing, Eduardo and I, this year, for him to experience this, he goes back every year and he remembers his friends and the life lessons that he learned. One of the life lessons for him was he was able to be so happy with so little when he came out of the Andes, because it was a new chance to live, just to have a chance to be alive and to be close to the people that he loved, to have water, to have a bed, to have a bathroom, to have food. That was just incredible, the happiness he would feel. And I think us mountaineers experience a little bit of that when we do long expeditions, hard expeditions, dangerous expeditions, and we come back to civilization, or even when we hike like these. And we enjoy the great indoors, as I like to call it, afterwards. That we experience a little bit of that. You're so happy with just your bed. That he experiences that, so he likes to go back and reconnect with that, because you lose that sensibility after years of living in the city and urban surroundings and worrying about the same stupid things everybody worries. That's how he describes it. Where when he came out of there, it was just, it's about living. It's about being with the people you love. So he likes to go there, reconnect with that. He likes to share his story, and that's why we do trips. And for him, it was very sad to see the whole place melted like that, because part of what connected him to the mountains was that this incredible alpine setting, or Andean setting to be precise, where the snow, the glaciers, the purity. Okay, so we're going to try for the first time this year, so marking the 50th anniversary, we're going to try to go in December, which is the end of spring, and to coincide with days when they were there. I'm sorry. We're going to go on December 6th through 11th, and if the snow conditions allow us, here's the cross. So you see where we're. It's a trip that's open to the public, by the way. If you want information on how to join us, you can. And this is going to be the end of an era. Eduardo's almost 75 years old now, and as he gets older, this trip is getting harder and harder for him. When he stops going to this place, will be the end of an opportunity to go to this place, to this historic place, see the artifacts that are there, and go in the company of somebody who lived it and who tells you what it was like. He's very open about sharing everything and answering questions. So, if you're interested in the story, want to dig deeper, you're welcome to join us. I'm going to open it up for questions. I hope you enjoy the presentation. And if you want to remember the name of the documentary, you can take a picture of the screen, or if you want to know more information about the trip, or just want to ask me a question or anything, there's my email. You can photograph that. But I think I showed you all the artifacts. If you like to come see, any questions before? Yes?
How many times have you been there?
I'm now, I think, other than the survivors, I think I'm the person who spent the most days at that particular. I am close to getting more. They spent 72 days. Eduardo is the one that spent the most because he's come on many expeditions. I've done almost 20 expeditions there. So every year, at least once, since 2006, sometimes 2 or 3 times with those extra, like the National Geographic expedition when we're exploring, or other documentaries I film. Yes?
You mentioned the pilots were lost, didn't know exactly where they were, thought they knew where they were. Did the plane have like a NDB or VOR or even an ELT? Like
I don't know.
Like modern nav kind of stuff?
They had, what I've heard from pilots is that they had navigation systems. It wasn't like modern planes, but definitely enough to know that they were in the wrong place.
Right.
It seems like they were trying to cut a corner to save fuel. It was hard for them to. They had to save fuel. There was many reasons, and they were trying to cut a corner, and they overdid it. They turned too soon, cut a corner, and that's one of the theories, the best theory I've heard of why they made such a crucial mistake. But with the instruments they had, they should have been able to navigate correctly.
Of the number of people that survived, how many are still alive today?
There were 16 survivors, and the oldest one, Javier Menton, died 2 years ago because he was in his 30s when this happened. The others were young guys. Eduardo was one of the older ones, 26, so that they're all alive still. And they all live in Montevideo, or one of them in Argentina. They get together every December 22nd to celebrate what they call their second birthday. It's like a new chance to live for them. So they say to each other, "Happy birthday" every time on December 22nd. I was invited to be part of their special celebration on the 40th anniversary in 2012. It was a great honor to be there with them. Something they do privately.
Do the others go into the mountains?
They have gone. Nando went a few times first. Roberto has gone. They've done it. Not all of them. Some of them, there's a few that never went back. There's one of them that never flew in a plane again. It was like, doesn't want anything to do with mountains or planes. Several of them haven't gone back. They just don't want to. But a lot of them did go back at least once for documentaries. But nobody has gone as many times as Eduardo. Now Eduardo, that goes with me every year, is the one that's gone the most. Turned out to be the most adventurous of them now. So that's why I say when he stops going, that'll be it. As far as you won't be able to go with somebody, with one of the 16 survivors. So I'm very honored to be part of that and to share that story with so many people. This is our latest trip in January with a film crew. The same film crew that did I Am Alive came, and they're doing a new documentary which you should be able to see. It'll come out probably in December or January. It's a shorter documentary celebrating the 50th anniversary, and it shows our expedition with Eduardo and I, Willie and I, going there, the discoveries we're finding, the changes of the glaciers, some of what I talked here. So that should be out too soon. And yeah, another question? Yes.
Ricardo, what's the altitude at where the plane rested?
12,000 feet.
12,000.
Yes.
So, you said that you found the passageway with debris that was unexpected. What did it feel like for you personally when you started to find those artifacts and you started to piece it together that was the true crash site where it came down? Did that feel pretty
it was unbelievable. I thought, when I first found the code, I felt like I was in an Indiana Jones movie. When I saw that it belonged to one of the survivors, I was like, this is unbelievable. I think this thing has been here since the crash. And so I couldn't believe that. And it was extremely exciting, exhilarating, because I love adventure, I love mountaineering. This combines everything that I love. Exploration, mountaineering, and then speaking of Explorers Club, this talk about true exploration. This finding things that nobody has found, exploring a place that nobody has explored. One of the climbs that I did in the only first ascents that I've done are in this region, because I explored alternate routes that they could have escaped, and I climbed 15,000 foot peak that had no previous known ascent, and photographed views that I don't, possibly nobody's seen. So for me, I'm not a world-class mountaineer or anything like that, but to have a first ascent, all thanks to this Andy Survivors Connection, it was just incredible. So it's changed my mind. This discovery has changed my life for the better. I mean, the friendship with Eduardo and everything that has come out of that was incredible. Really good for me.
Does he have any health problems, or is he?
He's very healthy. He eats healthy. He walks a lot. In fact, this summer we did an expedition to Kilimanjaro. He had never been. He's not a mountaineer, but he just goes on these expeditions on horses. And he walks a lot. He maintains himself healthy. So the plan was for him to accompany us. Kilimanjaro has a good trail, a lot of support. So we thought, accompany this group. It made a special expedition to climb with one of the survivors. And the plan was for him to make it to maybe high camp, wait for us for summit day, which is the hard part of Kili. But he did so good that he surprised us all, and he went all the way to the summit. And he summited at 75 years old, 19,300 feet, and he did it. And so he's in very good health right now. So we hope he'll do this trip many more years, but you never know.
You think he'll take him up off of Aqua?
No. I know, it's limited. I had to carry his pack. I was his Sherpa on Kilimanjaro. The whole time I had my pack and his pack, and that was tough for him. That was very tough, but again, you can't kill one of the survivors. And I was like, on the 50th, I was like, tell me how you're feeling. Let's not push it too much. But he did it. He did it. It was incredible. Any other questions?
Thank you.
No, you're welcome.
Great.
If you like to take a picture of any outside. Put the last screen, Uli. The last screen.
Oh, yeah.
If you wanted the information, contact information. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So you mentioned your experience.
I don't have any.